everyone to the May's FOREXT Friday. This is the 5th in the series this year. My name is Mark Pryor. I'm the chair of the Forex Network. So today we're going to hear from Gail Atkinson about demonstrating climate change adaptation in southeast England. And Gail is from Forest Research, and followed by Tom Houlihan from Teagasc from Ireland, who's going to talk about the development of their Irish forest carbon tool, which obviously follows on from the previous discussions we had about the French, Spanish and British carbon tools. Just a little bit about Forex, which for those who may not know, but sorry, this does repeat from previous talks, but I've tried to condense it. So the Forex Network is basically the network of extension organisations around Europe. We currently have 14 members, launched formally in October 2019, and it gives that screen will give you an idea of the sort of things. Basically, it's around building capacity within the members to support private forest owners. So we've currently got 14 organisations with a reasonable spread around Europe, but we are keen to welcome new members. So please do pass on information to anyone you know in other organisations and other European countries you think which would be appropriate. So just finally, really, just an idea of the Forex Fridays we've had. We're now going to have a break for the summer recess. So the next Forex Friday, if you could put in your diary, pencil it in your diaries, on Friday the 24th of September, which is the last Friday in September. We will confirm during that time who will be speaking, but we've certainly got ideas talking about women in forestry from one organisation, an Interreg project, and also I think the Slovakian colleagues are also interested in talking about some of their support for woodland owning. Anyway, I'll move on now and pass you over to Gail from Forest Research. So I'll just stop sharing my screen if I can. And I think the idea is we'll pause for questions for Gail after her presentation. So Gail.
Thanks, Mark. Hopefully you can see the screen okay.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Great. Well, thanks very much. It's really great to be presenting today. And as Mark said, I work for Forest Research. I'm based at Alice Holt Lodge, which is about an hour southwest of London, in our Centre for Sustainable Forestry and Climate Change. So Forest Research, it's Great Britain's principal organisation for forestry and tree related research, and we're known internationally for providing evidence and scientific services in support of sustainable forestry. And my focus over the last 5 years has been about demonstrating climate change adaptation. So day to day, I'm working to understand different aspects of climate change and what's happening in woodland across Europe as a result, and how we can better prepare our forests for the changes ahead. Today I'm talking about demonstrating adaptation in woodland in southeast England and what we've been doing to try and better understand adaptation. With most of the examples from Alice Holt Forest, so that's a temperate oceanic climate with the summer highs in London are around 38 degrees. And we've set up demonstration areas and we've linked these with a climate change adaptation trail. But we also have some examples on privately owned land in southeast England. And this has been very much collaborative project work with my colleagues in FR involved in developing the research that has underpinned the demonstrations in the trail. And I've learned a lot about the process of adaptation and some of the barriers and opportunities which are facing different stakeholders. And we've had some great support and collaboration with the District England Forestry England team, who manage the public forest estate. So for forestry and woodland management, we know that there are time periods within which to consider the changes associated with climate change, and our UK Met Office projections show that by 2080 we're expecting a summer mean temperature to increase across the UK, so around 4 degrees Celsius in the south and 2.5 further north. We're also expecting the summer rainfall to decline across most of England and Wales by up to around 40% decline in the very southeast. And so our Tyndall Centre has advised that the UK plan to adapt for 4 degrees increase. And we know that this is already having an impact on our tree species. So some of our really important species, such as oak, as we can see in the map provided, are expected to no longer be suitable for timber production in parts of the country. So, for example, here we can see in southeast England. I don't know whether you can see my my mouse, see my cursor, but I'm highlighting the southeast. So you can see the red area. We're expecting a severe decline in oak by around 2050 in this part of the country. And that's closely associated with the increasing moisture deficit in the southeast of England. So we know that we need to adapt our forests and woodland management to the changing climate. But when it comes to actually adapting, there are loads of decisions involved. The UK has got a good foundation to start to support decision making in the form of models, tools and guidance, and also our partnerships. So we have our Met Office projections. So we're using the UK CP18, which are our latest projections, and updated those released in 2009. We have, for example, our ecological site classification, which is a forest research decision support tool, which includes future climate change projections and allows users to incorporate future tree species suitability into planting decisions. So that now covers, I think the latest is about 60 different tree species. We also have a climate matching tool and guidance. Is guidance due to be released this summer on adaptation, which will be part of the UK Forestry Standard, our UKFS. And we have some demonstration areas, which I'm going to touch on in a minute. We have partnerships and collaborations. So there's the England Forestry and Climate Change Working Group, which was established about 6 years ago, and they've been pushing hard to encourage the sector to take action to adapt. So they launched a climate change accord back in 2015, and in 2018, another really hot summer here back in 2018. That year they published an action plan for climate change. And one of the things that action plan did was really stress the need to share knowledge about adaptation practices. And personally, from my involvement in a I must say it's brilliant European focus group on forest practices and climate change a few years ago, which was coordinated by Marcus Lindner. We know that it's important across Europe. There's loads of work and progress being made, but still a strong need to demonstrate what adaptation might look like, to really demonstrate that, to start discussions around that and how to adapt. So I suppose in short, the UK, I feel we're quite well placed to start to adapt our forests and woodlands and assess the risks posed by the changing climate to increase their resilience. Yet we still have evidence to show that limited progress has been made in terms of on the ground adaptation. And we know quite a bit about why managers plan to adapt, but maybe are yet to take action. And that demonstrating adaptive practice in a real world setting can really help. So some of my early research into this highlighted that landowners wanted to see how others are adapting, and yet there was a shortage of real-world demonstrations. So we created an adaptation trail to show the different types of adaptation measures in different types of woodland. Lots of different ways to adapt. Some are better understood than others, but our aims really were to inspire and inform climate change actions within the forestry sector, and also to create a platform to raise awareness that climate change is here now, and it's set to continue into the future, and to encourage people to act because of the really long timescales associated with forest management. So the trail was specifically designed for forest owners and managers in a way that it could be self-led. And it's near the research station where, under normal circumstances, I would be based. We also have a demonstration area nearby in Alice Holt Forest Park, which is about 10 minutes drive from our research station. And that is designed to communicate some of the basic information around climate change and forestry to the general public. And that's great. I mean, I think their figures are up to around 1 million day visits each year. So that's having quite an impact. Anyway, back to thinking about our trail. When we're thinking about measures to adapt, we identified a range of options, some likely to work, others not, and a few are on this slide. And we know that adaptation is about hedging your bets to a certain extent because there's still uncertainty about the rate of change and combined climate impacts. So mixing species and age and genetics often comes out as a priority. And we can see some of the measures that would work. I mean, if we come back to adaptation through species diversification, for example, our decision support tool ESC that I mentioned earlier, it highlighted that beech is no longer expected to grow well in Alice Holt Forest, but whereas species like hornbeam are likely to perform better in future. And again, because of the changes in moisture deficit. So we were keen to encourage a diverse array of approaches and encourage people to take opportunities to try different options, monitor the responses, and then integrate the measures that work best into their future plans. So the project planning for this, in the interest of time, I'll be really brief, but there's the project planning, forest planning, operations stage, and then the trail setup, launch, and some development activity. But I think collaboration with the district team was really key to this, so we could identify against their objectives and priorities and agree which measures would be most critical to find out more about and some of the practicalities involved. The trail opened, our climate change adaptation trail opened in 2019, and it visits 7 stops, each of which explores different aspects of climate change adaptation. And although it's self-led, I've accompanied several large visiting groups on the trail to get some feedback and have discussion at each of the stops. Forest Research, we've always also created supporting resources which are available to download from our website so that people can walk the trail using the trail guide and the signs, but there's also a worksheet and an audio download. And the guide has a map and basic information, whereas the worksheet poses more detailed poses questions and includes more detailed facts, and also includes some discussion questions as well. That's been really popular. And here you can see the trail guide. And our fact sheet. So I'm just going to touch on a few of the stops that we haven't got time to go to all of them today or virtually, but stop 1 is in Holt Hound, and here we can see a demonstration of species pairing mixtures. So we're thinking about how we can increase resilience. We have a stand of mature Corsican pine, and that's been underplanted with 2 broadleaf species to try and meet woodland restoration objectives, to increase species diversity and to improve drought tolerance. In terms of adaptation measures, mentioned that there's increased species diversity, but there's also a wider age range as a result of the underplanting, and the area is really now in the early stages of transition from a clear fell to an alternative forestry cover system. And we've increased the percentage of native broadleaf tree species of local provenance. So if you visit the stop, there's a stand of Corsican pine growing on a sandy soil, and that mature stand was originally planted in 1940. The area has been thinned, mulched and fenced and underplanted, with hornbeam, Carpinus speculus, and beech, Fagus sylvatica of UK 405 provenance. And the area is divided into Area A and Area B. So the balance of the 2 tree species has been adjusted in Area A to include more hornbeam. And as I said, that's expected to perform better than the beech in future because it has a higher drought tolerance. And at this stop, I found that we've often had discussions around the fact that species which are expected to perform poorly or in future needn't be absent from planting. The balance can be altered to give preference to species which are expected to do better, but important tree species needn't necessarily be absent. Now here we can see the hornbeam is romping along, as you can see on the right. I think it's the right of your screen as well. By 2050, as I mentioned, beech is expected to suffer severe decline in this part of the country in terms of suitability for timber, so hence the shift to an increased percentage in hornbeam. And I hope that as this area grows up, we'll be able to see a direct comparison between those 2. And at stop 2, we discuss appropriate management responses to increasing drought risk and how interventions offer opportunities to consider the future climate. So here we think about whether we can reduce the drought impact by thinning. Excuse me. So here there are young Corsican pines, which were thinned in 2018 at 2 different intensities in 2 adjacent subcompartments. And what we're trying to do is extend the expected yield of the stand. So as I mentioned, in this part of England, we're going to have a lot hotter, drier summers, and that's going to increase the competition for water. We hope there should be less drought stress in the trees where the heavier thinning was undertaken. The Corsican pine is growing on a sandy soil, but both areas were thinned using a harvester in February 2018. One area thinned to standard prescription and the other very heavily, and we're monitoring in both areas. So the interventions such as thinning offer an opportunity to change aspects of the stand and consider the emerging climate risks. We're really aiming here to extend the expected productivity and the yield in the face of climate change, and also in terms of needle blight as well. At stop 3, we take in a trial plot. So we go to a direct seeding trial plot, which was planted in 2009. We look at 3 mixed stands of different broadleaf species, which were established by direct seeding on former grazing land. And this is a great opportunity to discuss the importance of new woodland establishment and what opportunities there are to encourage natural selection. So this stop has also raised good discussion around the differences between research trials and the demonstration areas. In terms of adaptation measures, we talk about natural selection and how new woodland is really important for climate change mitigation. So it's a chance to discuss the points around carbon sequestration, trees and soil, providing timber products or biomass for energy to substitute for fossil fuels, and providing adaptation benefits such as flood protection. And then at stop 4, we visit a coast redwood provenance trial, which was planted in 1965. But really, the stop is around raising awareness of the increasing wildfire risk in southeast England, given that coast redwoods show wildfire resilience, and there are also opportunities associated with diversifying the age and the species. The fire frequency is predicted to increase in this part of the UK. When we experience drought in the late summer, the ground vegetation dries out and can act as a fuel source, particularly in spring. Fire stats peak in the years with extended summer droughts. And the research trial that we visit actually looked at different seed origins of coast redwood, sequoia sempervirens, and again shows the importance of research trials. In terms of adaptation measures, the species is really good for underplanting, and it's being considered as part of a strategy for species diversification, where the site conditions and the use of non-native species are considered appropriate. It can be used in combination with diversifying stand age, and we also know that the coast redwoods can be cloned and will self-seed. The species is one of the most highly valued timber species in native California and shows wildfire resistance. So we were really keen to stress that that might be advantageous in future in light of the increasing fire risk associated with the climate. But the main considerations for use in the UK really are the sourcing of seed, the risk of frost damage when it's young, and uncertainty as to how the species might tolerate flooded soil conditions. So I'll leave the other stops on the trail in the interests of time, but there is more information about this aspect of my work online. Forest Research will be releasing a suite of adaptation case studies and also our UKFS practice guide on adaptation later in the year. The work in Alice Holt Forest on the trail that I've described really complements wider activity across the forestry sector to try and encourage adaptation of woodland in public and private ownership. This work's enabled us to better understand which adaptation measures are suitable, which are not, and why, and also why some measures might appear suitable, but they're real practical barriers to their implementation. I've been fortunate enough to be able to adopt a co-production approach, but I appreciate that that's not always available. So some of them adaptation measures I've been involved with just wouldn't have been integrated into plans for a range of reasons, and often include an understanding of the main climate risks can be a barrier to integrating adaptation measures. But also things like deadlines required to get a plan revised so ops can continue, or the fact that there's so many different options available, even preconceived ideas about what adaptation is. So from developing the trail and my work on adaptation, I think that the plans are really important, but it's turning it into practice that's going to be key. And with adaptation and forestry, the measures need to be monitored to consider their success, and then we're able to do more of what works and less of what doesn't. We're monitoring the demonstration areas on the trail to see how they work out, which is good. It also takes a lot of resource, but I think ultimately more can be done to adapt and to learn from others as people start to adapt their woodland. The demonstration areas are a really good start, and I hope that the lessons we learn in southeast England will support others who are planning adaptation, particularly those concerned with forest planning, and also generate new ideas and discussion so we can take steps to consider and integrate adaptation measures in their fullest sense. And on a final note, I mean, this young oak at Alice Holt Forest could live for hundreds, maybe even 1,000 years. And when I stop to think about the changes and the rate of change it will have to endure to survive, it makes me think about the fact that we're making projections to the end of the century. This has got a lot longer lifespan, and I mean even in 100 years it will have locked up over a tonne of carbon, which is an ecosystem service that we as a society really need to continue. So I feel like this work's a great start, but there's quite a lot more to do. And hopefully in the future, I will be able to share some of the results from the monitoring in the demonstration areas with this group, and some case studies with you. Or when the current restrictions ease, you'd be very welcome to visit our trail. So thanks very much for your attention.
Great, thank you very much. Right, Gail, that's really interesting. Thank you. So I'm getting some feedback here. Has anyone got any questions for Gail? Oh, we've got one question. Please carry on, Ulrich.
Yeah, hello, Erwin Ulrich. I'm working at the French Forest Board, which is one of the biggest public forest management company. So we are exactly in the same problem. We have exactly the same problems as you have, and I'm very interested in what you have presented. And I have just two questions. The first is, you said you have a shortage of real world demos, so you produced some of them, but is it not possible to search in the UK or in England sites from natural forests? I mean, you don't have many of them, but natural forests that can show which might be the mixtures of tree species that could allow you to have success in transforming your forests. This is one question, and the second is the shortage of real-world demos valid for the whole United Kingdom, or is it only in your region or only in England? How does it look like?
Thanks, that's both great questions. I think the shortage of demonstration areas really showed the range of measures which were available to a suite of different risks. So yeah, we have some good examples of mixtures, but mixed species stands, whilst important and do address, maybe not so much with drought or temperature change directly, but would demonstrate or are a measure for windstorms and wildfire and the other risks. We were keen to show, I mean, my list centres around 10 different adaptation measures. So having all of those in the same place so that they could be discussed together. There's a shortage of that, and also a shortage on publicly accessible land as well. The other advantage to setting up a few of our demonstration areas is that it's enabled us to undertake baseline monitoring before the operations were carried out, and that will be really useful in a few years' time when we undertake the review at 5 years. And your other question was about the range of demos. Yeah, I mean, we've got lots of, we've got quite a good understanding of mixtures across the UK, but I think there's more that can be done to showcase those and understand those in the context of different climate change risks.
The big strength is that you have many sites on a short area. In a
small area, so it's a really good platform for knowledge exchange for those who are facing different climate risks.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Indeed.
Thanks for your question.
Great, thanks, Orin. Any other questions? No. Actually, one question from me, Gail. In terms of forest research, what sort of general information do you have available around climate change?
We launched our climate change fact sheet series earlier in the year, and they are for practitioners and explain some of the challenges of climate change for forests, and they've had really good uptake, and they're available from our website. I think the first 4 in the series was climate change on forests, climate change flooding in forests, and there's one on peatlands restoration to bog, and another one on climate change and biodiversity. There'll be I can't remember the second set off the top of my head, but the third series will be out later in the summer, and that'll include one on climate change adaptation and climate change adaptation measures.
Great. I mean, is it possible to put a link in the chat?
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? No. So in that case, well, thank you very much, Gail. And I think it's really great to be basically demonstrating some of these, some of these important areas, and I think we need more of it. Thanks. So now we're going to move on to Tom Houlihan from Teagasc. So Tom, do you want to share your screen and tell us about this carbon tool you've developed in Ireland?
Okay, thank you, Mark. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's great, thank you.
And is that screen up? Yeah.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So it should be a white screen saying the Forest Carbon Tool, is that correct?
Yes, that's the one. Okay,
thanks very much. And welcome everybody, thanks for joining today. So my name is Tom Houlihan, work with Teagasc, which is the Agriculture and Food Development Authority, which provides integrated research, advisory, training, and developmental supports to the agri-food sector and the wider bioeconomy in Ireland. And as some of our colleagues know, within Teagasc, our Forestry Development Department provides these integrated supports to the farm forestry sector and promotes new forest establishment in appropriate circumstances. So just in relation to the logos on the screen, our program is supported by the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. And the development of this tool was in conjunction with Dr. Kevin Black of Forest Environmental Research and Services, with a specialism in climate change and national greenhouse gas reporting. So a collaborative effort. Yeah, just very briefly, the topics, I won't delay in those, but just in terms of from an Irish context, we're looking at forest cover and planting initiatives just to set the scene. The different mitigation pathways for carbon sequestration, looking briefly at the modelling framework that's used for this carbon tool, and then just a few screenshots on using the tool itself and some output examples and a couple of take-home points. So again, just to set the scene here, about 5,000 years ago, 80% of Ireland was covered with trees. And if you followed the rolling circle, you can see how our forest cover has declined from 4,000 to 2,000 and 1,000 years ago, right up to today. And if you go back to about just 100 years ago, about 1% of our land area was under trees. And thankfully, this has increased today to about 11%, just over that. And we can benefit in many ways from further appropriate restoration of our tree cover. And since this Forex Network deals with extension, I just thought I'd mention that this story of forests in Ireland has been captured in an informative animated video. And it's hosted by Kira, who's our new virtual forest advisory colleague. And this is one of a series of videos being developed by my colleague Stephen Mahan, who recently presented on this FOREXT Friday platform. Okay, so, and we are aware at the moment of major climate change challenges, and I just looked up the atmospheric carbon dioxide parts per million in Hawaii, in Mauna Loa observation station. I think it's over 419 parts per million. So the challenges there. And from Ireland's perspective, afforestation in future years has an important role to play in terms of allowing us to build a significant forest sink. And another message that I think we will deliver is that climate change is certainly not the only reason for sustainably expanding Ireland's forest resource. So what I'm showing here is that there's a clear need for a balanced approach between achieving sustainable wood production and realizing the social and environmental roles underpinned by sustainable forest management in existing and in new forests. So there's quite a range there, but we need this balanced approach, and I think all forest types have a role to play. And just getting on to new forests, just to set the scene, Ireland's forestry programme is administered by the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, the Forestry Division, and we have 12 current grant and premium categories available for people that are looking to establish a new forest. So I'm showing some of them here, these grant and premium categories, or we call them GPCs for short, and these are modelled in the Forest Carbon Tool. So there's grants available for each of these for successful applicants to cover towards the costs of new planting and early maintenance. And then what I've shown down on the bottom left corner of each image of the 4 images here is a separate payment, which is an annual income tax-free premium, and these are also available to successful applicants in most cases for 15 years. So just in this slide here, I won't delay, but you can see top left, GBC tree, mainly conifer like spruce, with an addition of 15% either diverse conifer, other species, or broadleaves, and also for all these categories, there's an allowance of 15% of the site area for planting for what we call biodiversity enhancement areas, retained habitats, hedgerows, open areas. GPC4 is diverse conifer, example Scots pine. Bottom left, species like oak, crops, pure oak, and bottom right, an example of a birch forest, using improved material that we have. And just a couple of more examples that will again come into the modelling framework. GPCs 9 and 10 include native woodland establishment, again with our native species that provide a lot of ecosystem services. The premium rate available there are quite attractive. And then finally, I'll just mention another one is called Agroforestry, and that's GPC 11. Again, it's combining forestry with continued agriculture, in this case, silvopastoral, which is forestry, and grazing, you can see there in the images. And this is the only category where there's 5 annual premiums, and again, you see the rate. So we have obligations at the moment for national forest inventory reporting, and at forest level, the carbon balances are based on the net carbon emissions or removals from 5 pools. Again, I'll quickly show them there: the above ground biomass pool, below ground, the litter pool, the deadwood pool, and the soil carbon pool. And we hear the term fluxes, which are carbon transfers between these pools from one pool to another, not forgetting the emission of valuable oxygen that we all need. And the forest modelling framework we're using in this tool includes all carbon fluxes associated with these pools, and the final output is the sum of the carbon stock changes. So this is the forest site sequestration. Again, just showing it here in other images of broadleaves and conifers. That's an important mitigation pathway, but we've got other ones. So the long-term storage of carbon in harvested wood products, and this is a well-recognized and very important pool outside of the forest. And a third one is the substitution of fossil fuels with wood energy. And this is just an example from my local area, where it's a farmer plant which utilizes locally supplied and conditioned wood chip, and it's displacing over 1 million litres of fossil fuel per annum. And along with on-site solar and wind energy, it's saving about 3,000 tonnes of carbon yearly as well. So these are the 3 sequestration pathways that we will be referring to in the Forest Carbon Tool. And just to mention a further area that is not in the current framework, but has very significant potential for a positive influence, as the substitution of wood products for energy-intensive materials. And by that I mean concretes and steel. And again, it's a growing area in other jurisdictions. And I just mention here, perhaps I'm sure Bjorn is familiar with this. I would call it the ultimate example at the moment. In Brumunddal in Norway, at 85 meters, the world's largest timber building, using engineered wood products such as glulam to very good effect. So getting to the carbon model, and the carbon tool uses a model called the carbon budget model, or CBM, which is a Canadian model, and it has been adapted for Irish conditions, and it's well recognized, has been peer reviewed and validated, and is I think it's widely used across the world, and also in some cases for national greenhouse gas inventories. So what I'm showing you here is a very simplified representation, so maybe pardon that, but just to try and keep it as simple as possible. The model is based, as you can see, on timber volume increment curves from industry standards and also developed curves. And these volume increment curves are imported into the carbon budget model, and it converts growth into biomass components. And then it incorporates the carbon transfers that I mentioned in the previous slide, it's based on carbon allocation into biomass turnover, mortality, where it occurs, disturbances such as harvesting. So this reflection of carbon transfers simulates the uptake and release of carbon from the forest system. And there's also the transfer of harvested timber in the forest into harvested wood product model and a bioenergy model that is used. So basically, the model takes into account carbon stock changes from both within and outside of the forest ecosystem to give the sequestration output data. Why have we developed this carbon tool? It was developed again in conjunction with our collaborators I mentioned for a number of reasons. Raising awareness is very important, providing up-to-date information, and again stressing that we use the most up-to-date information, but that is subject to change, and we have to be conscious of that. Allowing comparisons of the relative merits of varying afforestation scenarios, but also keeping in mind that there's a whole lot of other objectives by owners as well as sequestration, so we can't lose sight of that. And the tool uses the best information available at any time. This current iteration will require regular updates as new information is becoming available, and there are knowledge gaps we acknowledge to be filled in the future. So it's not intended at this stage to provide absolute data on forest carbon valuation or for potential trading platforms. And again, this is emphasized in our assumptions page on the tool. And just a brief word on metrics. Again, I'm just conscious of time, but the tool incorporates two metrics, which are normalized values or averaged values over 2 forest rotations. And the first would be the mean annual sequestration rate over 2 rotations. So it's the annual uptake of carbon, what's that rate yearly, and then get the average. And the second one we call the cap for short sequestration value. And it's used as an indicator of sequestration potential, and it generally stays in a steady state after 2 or 3 rotations, and we use this to make a comparison across different species and rotations. So both these metrics are, as I say, normalized measures of sequestration, and they allow to the best of what is possible comparisons over different rotation ages. And what we have found that in general, longer rotations tend to have a higher cumulative potential, but maybe a lower average annual sequestration rate, and vice versa. So if you look at the 2 images here on the slide, on the left you have a shorter rotation spruce forest that has a cap as indicated by the dashed line. Now, because of the shorter rotation, there is a higher annual sequestration rate. And if we look at an oak forest, again, a lot longer rotation, a lower annual sequestration rate, but from our modeling, it has a higher potential sequestration or cumulative sequestration. So there's trade-offs there in terms of species. At this stage, just for the final few minutes, we'll have a brief look at accessing and using the carbon tool, and it's available on the forestry homepage of the Teagasc website. And again, this is a valuable source of information. My colleague Stephen has put a lot of work into it and continues to do so. If you look at our website on the bottom of the first page under what's new, the Forest Carbon tool can be accessed. It can also be accessed using the web address that I've shown on top. It brings the user directly to the tool landing page, and it gives an overview of the tool. And the tool is available on all common web platforms. So that includes Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, as well as on mobile devices. And then the user can click and then access the tool by the button that's shown here on the slide. So the first page within the tool outlines some of the main assumptions, as well as the background methodology and the system boundaries, which are important. And I suppose it's important that users are familiar with these and they understand the capabilities of the tool, as well as the areas with scope for further developments. And these certainly will be in train. So under the methodologies and system boundaries section, there is a link to a document, a detailed document providing a description of the development and the working of the tool, as I say, in more detail. This web page contains two tables. Table 1 describes the assumptions used for the range of grant and premium categories that I've just gone through in the earlier slides. And Table 2 describes similar assumptions for more general species and species groups. So the two tables there. And then once all assumptions are read, which we would ask all users to do, the user can press the accept button and move actually to the calculation page. So accepting the assumptions page brings the user to this calculate page, where users can select either grant and premium categories or otherwise more general species groups. Again, these are represented in the tables, and there's a link to back to those tables in the previous page. So here we have selected grant and premium categories, and this brings two drop-down lists. The first is the range of grant and premium categories that we can be currently selected. So you can see of the 12, work is ongoing to derive data for GPCs 9 and 10, which are the native woodland categories, and these will be they'll be uploaded in time once further data analysis and validation has been completed for these categories. But in this example, shown in the blue, we have selected GPC 8, which, if you remember back, consists of high yield class birch category. And then this is the first selection. The second selection required is the soil type from another drop-down menu. And here we are selecting mineral soil from the list as the appropriate option in this case. Having made these two selections, the next step is to simply hit the calculate button, which produces carbon sequestration outputs. So this is the outputs page, and again we're looking at GPC 8, which is a birch forest. We get estimated carbon dioxide removals relating to the forest site, the harvested wood products, and fossil fuel substitution with wood energy. So you see that just highlighted in red. These combined values provide a mean sequestration rate in terms of tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per hectare per year, again over 2 rotations, and that rotation assumed is 75 years in this stage. So the mean figure, the mean sequestration is 3.46, as indicated in the red line on the graph also. And the graph which shows the annual sequestration over time, it also shows that it varies. It's not static, so it starts off and it builds. There's disturbances through thinning and harvesting. It starts building again over a second rotation. So the graph is important to show this change in carbon fluxes over time. And the cap value in this case, which is the average cumulative sequestration, is estimated at about 470 tons per hectare. And this represents an indication, as I said, of the per hectare sequestration potential for this category, which is birch forest. So if you just keep that in mind, the figures here, 3.46 average sequestration per annum, and the overall cumulative for a birch forest. I'm just moving on now to compare this with a high-yielding, mainly coniferous forest containing an assumed 70% productive conifer with broadleaf and biodiversity components incorporated here in this modelling. And you see that the mean sequestration rate is significantly higher. That's the annual rate at 6.82 per hectare, while the cumulative value is lower, but still quite significant at 357. And just a final quick look at the category GPC 11, which is incorporated the agroforestry option, which can include, as I say, the silvicultural systems, grazing and livestock grazing, as well as widely spaced trees. In this scenario, the appropriate soil type is mineral. The user has 2 additional drop-down selections, one for livestock type, and here you can see the options available in the tool, which include grazing by sheep, young dairy cattle, dry stock, and also poultry option. And I have also indicated here the assumed emissions per head for each livestock type, and in parentheses, the range of units that may be selected for each livestock type. So in this example, we are selecting sheep at a stocking of 12 head per hectare as the option, and can hit the calculate button. And in this scenario, the mean annual sequestration by virtue of the forestry component is 2.86. The agricultural emissions from the sheep, which is just over 2 tonne per annum, which is deducted, giving a net sequestration of 0.83. The cap value for this system is lower than the previous 2 examples. It's about 187. Again, this is due to the agricultural emissions. So in the absence of livestock, it probably would be around 340. And finally, the outputs from all scenarios that we run using either GPCs or species groups from table 2 can be converted to PDF and either downloaded or printed off. So finally, 3 or 4 take-home messages. Firstly, I suppose new planting can play a very significant role in addressing our needs for climate change mitigation, and moving towards achieving our challenging planting targets is needed if we wish to achieve a strong carbon sink. And I believe a range of forest types and approaches are necessary and can deliver a different range of ecosystem services according to objectives. And finally, I would say that the potential of material substitution, again, which we haven't included in this modelling framework yet, so substituting concrete and steel, combined with sustainable increases in harvesting levels, can have a high potential future impact for our sequestration and mitigation challenges. Okay, so I'll stop at that. Hopefully I've left a couple of minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Tom. I mean, that's really interesting. I think it's great to sort of show the real impact of the removals from the forest, which often don't seem to get taken into account when we're looking at forestation. So it's really quite important. Are there any questions for Tom?
What I might say, Mark, is that, as I said, it's the first iteration of this tool, and we were very interested. I was actually in touch with Dr. Pat Snowden after his presentation, and he kindly sent me some information. But we were very interested in just learning from other areas as well, and maybe this is part of the strength of the network, that if there are other data sources and data from other areas, we'd be very interested in maybe a bit of collaboration.
Absolutely. Yeah, and certainly I think it's trying to actually learn from each other, and different ways of showing things is really useful. Erwin, you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, it's a quite interesting approach, and I hope it will help forest owners to launch themselves in a new experience. I've just a question which we have, a problem we have currently I think in whole Europe, and perhaps you have thought about it. does the carbon tool take into account eventually with scenarios the decrease in growth and consequently in sequestration capacity, as the probability is quite high that even resilient tree species will have in temperature if the temperatures rise and the drought frequencies increase, will have less growth?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Very, very relevant. No, what I would say is it's the first iteration, and we're assuming after 2 or 3 rotations that a steady state. So it's certainly something that we need to take on board and factor in maybe in future versions. But the model we have at the moment is, I say, it's a relatively simple model, and there probably is a need for what I would say dynamic models that will take those factors on board. And again, I think it's probably a challenge, Ulrich, for every country to look at that. And from the very interesting presentation on adaptation earlier, like there certainly is challenges, and we face the same issues in Ireland in terms of looking at changes in climate and how it'll impact on a whole range of scenarios. Some might be positive, depending on the area and the species and the soil type, and others maybe provide a strong challenge. So this tool isn't as advanced as that yet, but it's something that maybe looking to the future, we'll probably need other models and maybe more dynamic models as well to look into that. We have a tool that was developed a number of years ago by the Council for Forest Research and Development called ClimateAdapt, which looks at adaptation challenges and possibilities at a spatial, probably a townland or landscapes, a spatial scale. And again, we can build on this work to I suppose inform us, and we all need to be informed. And I think learning today from different people and sharing knowledge in the future is going to be very important.
Thank you very much, indeed.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? Yes, so Nuala has just made the point that the model is useful to compare different scenarios as a decision support tool. And I think certainly, I think both the talks today have really given a good idea of how we need to be better at talking about and explaining some of the real benefits of forestry and some of the issues we have to deal with, and trying to ensure that forest owners understand all those concepts, and these are ways in which we can do it. And certainly by sharing some of these ideas and options, then I think it's really good to promote it generally across Europe.
And I must say, Mark, that I would have found the earlier presentations a few weeks ago from Dr. Pat Snowden and other contributors very useful. Just I suppose it's maybe comparing the work that's going on in different areas, but also just in terms of data sources and figures. And I think we're all in a learning process, even within a forest system. The impact of a tinning operation, different forest management operations, is a complex process, and we're, I suppose, building understandings on it. But it's good to have other information sources to help this understanding develop.
Great. Good. Well, I think we've just about reached our time now. So thank you to both the speakers for keeping to time. And please have a look at the chat. There are a couple of links there which are worth looking at. And obviously, and the climate tool link is there as well.